We're here today to talk about Web3. The future is here and now. I know you've just had lunch, so thanks for coming along. It's good to see everyone. And I'll start off with introductions. So I'm Max Carmichael-jack. I'm head of research at Cryptonary, which is a research and education firm. And Jamie?
Thank you, Max. My name's Jaime Leverton. I'm the CEO of Hut 8 Mining. For those of you not familiar with Hut 8, we're one of the oldest and largest Bitcoin mining companies that were publicly traded on the TSX as well as the NASDAQ, headquartered in Canada. Earlier this year, we made an investment into 5 traditional data centers, which we're using to build out bespoke products and services for the Web3 ecosystem, which is something I'm super excited to talk to you guys about today. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Ramani Ramachandran. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Router Protocol. A router is building a cross-chain interoperability layer that basically lets blockchains talk to each other. Been around for a few years now. We've been funded by Coinbase, QCP, Alameda, the usual names. We are one of the leading players in the bridging space, cross-chain bridging space. And yeah, excited to talk more about interoperability, among other things, with some smart folks.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kamran Shahin, and I'm based here in Dubai, and I basically lead all of Mastercard's blockchain and crypto initiatives and strategy for the EMEA region, and I also work with the global team on product development in the blockchain and crypto area for Mastercard.
Thank you. I'm Willy Lim. I'm from R3. I lead our global advisory looking after digital currencies, capital markets. Well, R3 is a form of a company coming out from R&D, coming out from the banks. But we're here to explore around like how traditional finance will bridge into like the DeFi world. Thank you. It's good to be here today.
So Web3 as a topic is used a lot without a lot of meaning in many cases. It's used interchangeably for the word crypto. And I think a good starting point is for us to talk about what you think Web3 actually is and what it means.
I'm laughing because Max actually gave me the best definition I've heard about what is Web3 today, so I'm going to shamelessly steal it, because I told him to lead with it, and he obviously didn't, which is Web 1 was read, Web 2 was read, write, Web 3 is read, write, own.
Good answer.
So good. It's so simple.
And you want me to follow up on that?
Well, you can give the more technical answer.
I mean, I guess it's a long answer. But yeah, I'd probably talk till kingdom. But I guess Web3 is about decentralization, and then what's a new perspective? Right? I guess Web3 is about the consumer not being the product at the end of the day. I mean, you've seen how a lot of these companies that play middlemen, right? I mean, in the banking sector, in the technology sector, in many banks still, for the privilege of borrowing your money, most banks charge you a fee. They use your data. They should share that with other partners. In technology, you've seen Facebook, Google, etc., making billions basically based on getting you addicted to a product and using your data. So I guess Web3 is a natural response of the whole libertarian movement that started off in 2009 and so on and so forth. And I think there's still, the interesting thing is, I guess a lot of people intuitively understand what Web3 is. I guess the more interesting conversation is around, there are some things that can be decentralized. There are some things that cannot be decentralized, and that's why you have these DAOs. Some of them work, some of them don't work. So yeah, there's a lot of tangents around what is Web3, and we can go from there. So let me stop at that, and
Awesome.
So I would be guilty of third-hand stealing if I stole the first two. So instead of that, I'm going to just add a little bit of elaboration. So fully agree with everything everybody has said. The only additional element I would add, just to give a slightly different spin on it, is Web3 is basically about building applications and experiences in a way where consumers and parties own and control their transactions in a way that they do not do in the Web2 world today. Now, that can be enabled through a number of different technologies. Blockchain has a role to play. Crypto has a role to play. NFTs have a role to play. Traditional technologies even might have a role to play. But the ultimate aim for it is for people to have a lot more autonomy and a lot more control over their profiles, their data, the knowledge, and everything that they create.
Echoing to what our fellow panelists here is talking today, definitely to me, Web3 is all about like democratization and inclusivity of data. So it's really going back to really like empowering you as an owner of the data. So take it to example, like you, in our Web2 model nowadays, it's really, the incentive is all around the intermediaries who are controlling a lot of this data. So when it comes to Web3, it's really all about me. For example, I have my own data, and I can probably sell it and monetize it. But at the same time as well, it's also like bringing back the control to the real owners of data. The implication of Web3 is actually quite massive because it allows us to rethink about like the current problems of the current state around like where data is concentrated to much more, making it more democratized, but in a more secured and privacy way.
And we're seeing rapid adoption of crypto and Web3 over the last several years, especially recently from institutions and people. What is the next step? Where does this adoption lead in the institutional markets? And if we start with you, Kamran, there.
Sure. I think the adoption of crypto, I think puts forward a lot of opportunities for the traditional markets as well. First of all, if you look at crypto as it exists today, crypto today has tangible use cases associated with it. Right? Very, very different to how it was in 2017 when the only reason you would buy crypto was because you would hope for the value to appreciate. For the last year and a half, me as a crypto enthusiast, I can confidently say that I buy crypto now because I need it to purchase the NFTs I want, or because I can earn with it using decentralized finance protocols that I have some confidence in and that I can trust. And because tangible use cases has now materialized, there is a lot of potential there to really expand this. If you look at the crypto world today, most of the heavy crypto users are maybe 10 to 20 million people around the world. People who have the technical know-how to understand how to work with a crypto wallet and how to work with the various crypto offerings that are out there. But these offerings should be benefiting a lot more people. They should be benefiting 2 billion, 3 billion people, for example. Now, how do you bring them into the fold, right? Clearly, you need to make user experiences better. You need to look at how existing user experiences can extend to the crypto world. And this is where the traditional financial sector, I think, has a big role to play, and which is where a lot of the institutions are seeing a lot of opportunity.
And in terms of the benefits for traditional companies, Willy, if we jump to you, what are the benefits of traditional companies using crypto and Web3?
Definitely, it's provided a massive benefits because take it to example around transparency. Transparency is something that enforces trust, and this is something that is quite difficult in the current traditional space for a variety of reasons because we have like systems that are outdated that doesn't talk to each other, and this really increase a lot of costs. Now, another thing about Web3 and crypto as well, one thing is really quite innovative is around like it allows institutions to build a much more robust business model that's adapting to what end consumers really looking after. Take it for example, like we started to see like the application of DeFi around like staking, all of those like pooling, which is quite relevant to the for the traditional space because not only it allows effectively like a more liquidity into the space, but it also allows a lot of more participation and access.
And it's a very early on sector in many ways. There's a lot of risks present in crypto and Web3 at the moment. And I wanted to jump to you, Ram, to find out what your view on the biggest risks are in Web3 and how they can be mitigated.
Just a small question.
Again, I mean, yeah. It's interesting because you asked specifically me that question because I'm in the cross-chain bridging space, and as you know, 90% of hacks happen in the cross-chain bridging space. But I think security has two aspects to it, right? One is obviously poorly designed code or security architecture that lets attack vectors sustain after the mainnet launch, and that's obviously something hackers exploit. And that actually is not a bad thing in the long run. That weeds out in a very cruel Darwinian way, and that actually improves the ecosystem. The code gets better, the security learning gets better. What's really even more sort of a bigger problem that you should contend with is sort of goes back to what Kamran said about the UI UX. Of the 21 million of the 19 million Bitcoin out there currently, right, 18 or 19 or something is still in circulation, almost 3 to 4 million are in cold wallets. And people have forgotten the access to the passcodes to that or the keywords. They don't have access to it anymore, right? So you have on the one side you have decentralization, you have MetaMask wallets, etc. But when I try explaining that to very sharp friends of mine from Web2, so they tell me, listen, so you have something on your browser, and then you put in hundreds of thousands of dollars there, and you write down a 12-word keyword, and you can't store it on your computer, it's put on a piece of paper. I mean, it just blows their mind. So a lot of the security is also about the UI, UX. How do you make those interfaces simpler for the 99%, non-tech savvy, your grandmom in Ohio or whatever? There's a term they refer to in the US, right? So I think that's the other aspect of the whole security conundrum. How do you make it simpler and easier to use? Because one is obviously hacks, which is active malice, but having bad user experience, having difficult interfaces is actually passive malice, and it's going to really delay. And then the sooner we fix that, the easier the uptick of the whole Web3 into the broader population will be.
Definitely. And I'd be curious to hear everyone else's views on the biggest risks.
So I just wanted to build on that a little bit and add, a couple of other elements. So crypto is a big space, right? And depending on what kind of application, what kind of transaction you're talking about, there are some risks that materialize for which there are solutions which are available, right? So in a lot of cases, if you're going to bring 2 billion people in addition to simply losing the credentials to your wallet, one of the other problems, for example, people face is sending money by accident to the wrong wallet. This happened to me as well, right? And all the basic checks and balances you have in existing payment systems, those need to be put into place there as well in a way that is easy to use and seamless, right? So for certain types of transactions, the concept of verified identities being linked with crypto wallets, allowing people to transact with people they know, so you don't have to remember a long address. I can simply send it over to Willy, for example, rather than having to remember his wallet address. Those things are going to be very, very necessary. The other element to consider as well is that although crypto is a lot less actually associated with illegal activities than is perceived, there is still a small amount that happens, right? And crypto is actually very, very traceable. So the ability to risk scan parties before you enable transactions with them, right? That is another crucial component of it as well. Smart contracts is another area, right? Decentralized finance solutions, bridges, NFT marketplaces, all of these at the end of the day are implemented as a series of smart contracts. Some smart contracts are higher quality than others, right? And already you are seeing lots of initiatives underway to verify these smart contracts, audit them, give them a certain stamp of quality to give people trust to go ahead in them, right? So those frameworks, I believe, can be improved a lot as well to give people more trust as you're going into it. So that when I'm putting my money into a DeFi protocol, I'm not worried about a little developer error that causes the entire liquidity pool to be siphoned off, as we have seen in some.
To clarify, when you talk about verifiable addresses and things like that, are you talking about it almost turning into a kind of traditional finance system and you have the option of doing that and you still have the option of unhosted and unverified addresses? Or are you talking about that becoming a whole?
No. That definitely has an option. It's a spectrum, right? Because there will always be the need to have anonymous wallets transacting anonymously. But then there are certain types of transactions for which that just doesn't work, right? So if you're having a normal person-to-person transaction, that is absolutely fine. However, if you're paying into Carrefour's wallet to buy groceries with crypto, you want to make sure you're sending money to Carrefour's wallet, okay, and not to some XYZ wallet. So you have to take a use case by use case look at these things. Some use cases require participant verification, right? Simply because of the nature of the use case itself. So it's not that every single wallet should become identified by any means, right? But to participate in certain types of transactions, that basic infrastructure is required.
Yeah. And Willy, what's your view on risks in Web3 and crypto?
So it goes back to really certainty and trust. So we need to have the right technology that really promote trust, whether it's we define transparency. It's really not just about opening it to the public, but it's really around in a need-to-know basis kind of a transparency. Where, for example, certain use cases were being developed, for example, that promote trust, things around like the auditability, the backchain, or what we call the historical view of the transaction, which can be promoted in a secured ledger, for example, that is disputed, that is certainty, is valid, and it's tamper-proof. Things like this. The other thing as well, we also need to understand the role of the regulator. I know regulators sometimes can be quite daunting for us, but it is the role of the regulator to legitimize a lot of this technology, underlying technology, by helping them to understand that this technology actually promotes trust. Things around it follows certain security standards, things like this that has been learned there since in the beginning, even in the traditional space, for example. So things like this will need to be there as a basic element to be able to promote trust.
And Jamie?
Yeah, I was going to touch on exactly that. As a North American pubco, I think one of the things we've really struggled with is lack of regulatory clarity across the spectrum of crypto, which I think the sooner it can come, the better. We've seen some very significant implosions of companies in our space, unfortunately, where predominantly the retail investor was the victim. And so I think that destroys trust, which is critically important to ultimate adoption and to reducing the risk. So I think whether we like it or not, we need regulation to drive adoption. And I think the U.S. is the largest capital market in the world, and so that clarity has to start with them.
In terms of ESG, we see a lot around ESG and how crypto and Bitcoin specifically is bad for the environment. As a mining company...
That is one perspective. I happen to hold a different perspective.
Give us it.
Which is, look, Bitcoin uses proof of work. Proof of work requires a significant amount of energy. The energy used to verify the Bitcoin blockchain is a feature. It is absolutely not a bug from our perspective. And the ability of the Bitcoin miner, which of course I'm biased being one, the ability for us to introduce large-scale flexible loads into communities and into power grids, I think is the most bullish use case to be able to fund incremental investment in renewable projects in order to make sure we have stable base loads, that we have the appropriate monetization of grids in order to make grids work properly in concert with the constituents that they serve. There is no other industrial scale load that is flexible the way the Bitcoin load is. I'll just give you an example. Our site in Medicine Hat, Alberta, Medicine Hat is an independent power authority. We're directly connected to the power plant in the town, and we have a demand response relationship with the grid and with the local government, the local community. We will dial up and down that power on a moment's notice. Literally, they send us an email. We can drop 5 megawatts of load. We can drop an entire 60 megawatts of load, and within minutes, and power it back up when that requirement's no longer required of the local grid. So I think we're really in the early stages of understanding the true power of miners working in concert with energy, and ultimately where this could lead us to drive a more renewable global energy environment.
Nice. And you mentioned the UI UX, Ram, of crypto and how that's one of the biggest issues present at the moment.
Right.
One of the biggest issues with the user experience is the lack of cross-chain interoperability,
right,
which is something that you guys are really involved in. And I wanted to know your view on kind of how this problem can be resolved and what potential it holds if it is resolved.
Yeah, I think, can I make a quick point on the whole ESG thing? I'm not remotely qualified.
I'm not sure yet.
I'm not remotely qualified on this thing, but I think people talk about Bitcoin burning so much energy, but I mean, if you look at the banking system, if you look at the system that's replacing, that's a perspective that a lot of people are aware of, but that needs to be re-emphasized. I mean, those big buildings and Wall Street and the city and DIFC and all that and all those traffic and that has a carbon footprint and all those business class flights that so it's not an apples for apples comparison. And Bitcoin itself, you have a lot of these marginal use cases that would otherwise not see the light of the day. For example, these flares on these the flare burning. I mean, it's just being wasted right now. Somebody smart figured out that you can actually connect a mining rig and actually use that. So there are
waste methane as well.
Exactly. And there's tons of other use cases. In fact, there's a startup in Canada that sort of they were sort of using the heat from the turbines and using that to power rigs. So there's a ton of use cases that are, I think, in the early stages of all this. It's like maybe looking at the automobile industry in the 1900s. It's probably stinking up the joint back then with the fumes, right? I mean, but look at today. You have everything, at a far more advanced stage of evolution, right? So, yeah, let me stop there and then sort of come back to the question that you asked me. But, sorry.
We could talk energy all day.
Exactly. But yeah, I think, cross-chain, let me start with an analogy, right? Let me talk about why cross-chain is very important from a user experience perspective. 20 years ago, as some of us in this hall might remember, I mean, some of the older ones, right? When you received a document on your, let's say, your Windows PC, and you tried to send that to your friend who had a MacBook, right? The Word doc wouldn't open up because you had to download a different version of Microsoft Word, and you did a lot of jumping through hoops to actually just open up a bloody Word document, right? And then along came AWS and Google Docs and all that, and fast forward to 2022, if you just receive a document on your phone, a Google Doc, you can open it up on your phone or your laptop, whatever, right? So something has happened that has abstracted away the complexity of the underlying app to the end user, and you have a seamless user experience across operating systems. So the cross-chain analogy is exactly parallel to that, right? So you have multiple operating systems, right? But as an end user, you just want to trade. You want to get the best trade rate for your swap or for your yield farm, whatever, right? And as an app developer, again, you don't want to solve for 10 different ecosystems or 20 different ecosystems. I mean, you want to have a situation where you have one app and that runs seamlessly on Solana, Polygon, Ethereum, Algorand, what have you. So that's the beauty of that's the problem that the whole cross-chain interoperability is trying to solve, right? So now once you have that, it becomes a seamless user experience. So in a few years from now, you're going to have one Uniswap, one Aave, right? And you don't need to go to MetaMask and change the blockchain RPC, and you don't have to solve for all that. That's all going to be seamless to you. It's like booking a ticket on Expedia.com. You want to go from London to Singapore, and you want to sort of set the time and what class you want to fly in, and boom. On the back end, it's going to plug into multiple ticketing systems and all that, and do its magic and come back to you with a bunch of codes, right? But that's all opaque to you, abstracted out to you, right? So that's the analogy there.
Nice. And Willy, I know that cross-chain interoperability is something that you guys focus on as well. So if you want to give us your view on that?
Yeah, definitely. Cross-chain interoperability is a massive but a very important topic. We view it from our analysis at R3 is mostly around not just only interchain, but it's also around with the traditional space. For obvious reason, we need for us to be able to successfully link together the TradeFi, what we call the traditional finance, to the DeFi. You need to have interoperability that works for every different kind of technology. The most important thing, like in our cases now, during the first iteration of blockchain, we talk about blockchain of network. What we're looking now at the moment is we are creating what we call interoperability, regardless of what chain it is or what traditional workspace it is. Our vision is ultimately when you issue, for example, a token or a crypto digital currency or something or an NFT, it can exist in any other ledger, or it can exist in another chain. Really the basic element is around simplicity, allowing user experience to be able to work dramatically, and also allow AI, especially as we move to Web3, it's all around application. It's less of the intermediaries, but more into application, making sure the right data are being exposed. The AI will be able to calculate things like this and be able to promote more trust into the ecosystem. And with all of this, you'll now be able to see innovation come into the play. Fintech, startup are able to develop use cases that are more targeted to what the end consumer needs and wants at the end of the day.
And regulation is something in crypto that we're seeing become a massive focus. We're still seeing hilarious misunderstandings from people like the US Congress and around the world. But we have both sides here because we have DeFi native products, we have companies that are private and public. So I'd like to get all of your view on regulation at the moment and what the next steps are and how we can kind of foster the growth that we want to see. Anyone can start.
Well, I mean, I touched on it earlier. I think what's first and foremost, given what's happened in the U.S. market in particular, I think we're going to need to see regulation. I think we will see it in the shorter term on exchanges, on stablecoins and tokens. I think those are kind of the easiest paths to tackle. I think DeFi is probably going to come later. I think that's a much more challenging environment for regulators. But I think any initial signal that they're regulating our space and they're being thoughtful about it will be broadly welcome, as long as it's thoughtful.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a fine balance, right? There's no right or wrong, and it depends on the context and the situation. But broadly, one perspective I'd like to add is, in the mid-90s when the internet started, there's a lot of apprehension about how this is going to enable money laundering, drug trafficking, child pornography, a lot of the fringe use cases, right? I mean, that was, and rightly so at that point, a big focus on how do we sort of have the internet up and running, but without all these use cases being facilitated, right? And then the community came together, Netscape and Sun and all the big guys, big boys at that time. They decided to self-police. They decided, we're going to monitor any such activity and we're going to sort of flag this to the appropriate regulator, right? So, and that sort of then led to the whole secure socket layer, SSL, private communications, etc. That was the foundations of Amazon and pretty much everything you see online. I mean, in the late 90s, if you typed in your password, anybody could go in and steal that off the internet, of the local network, right? So, but encryption and all those technologies actually were enabled after the governments and the companies sort of came together and understood each other's concerns, right? And sort of decided to work together. And I think instead of fighting with each other, at some point the companies and the regulators are going to figure out, listen, we've got to make this work, right? And I think that point is good. I think it's happening at many levels, and I think increasingly it will happen when there is folks going from, say, Binance to Edia or, or the other way around. And I think that sort of cross-pollination is important, and I think it's an evolutionary process.
If you go back to the start of the internet, there was also an energy debate. Because computers were using energy, and
Yes.
it was a new technology that was using a whole bunch of energy. Smartphones, we had the same debate.
Right.
And also on the regulatory point, there was a lot of talk about introducing an email tax
Yes.
to make up for the damage that was going to be done to the U.S. Postal Service. So I think it is very, very normal in bleeding edge technological innovation that we have these kinds of debates, which in hindsight we can laugh about. But
and I guess the degen Web3 view, not my view, but a lot of the folks, especially for them, the government is the biggest mafia around. Right? They just want the take. Like
right.
I know a lot of governments. I won't name them for obvious reasons, but I mean they don't care if crypto is legal or illegal. They just want a tax. I mean, so there's one government which sort of, for the longest time, was trying to figure out what to do with crypto. They sort of tried to figure it out. They kept pushing the ball each year. And then finally they decided, you know what? They bluntly said that. We haven't decided if it's legal or not, but hey, we want to tax you. We want to charge you 30%. Yes, I mean, so, yeah.
Sorry, we sidebarred there.
I think what's required on both sides, on the crypto native world and on the traditional finance world, especially in terms of regulators, is a lot more dialogue and much more effort to understand each other's perspectives, right? So sitting in the middle, as I do at Mastercard, I can tell you from a lot of regulator conversations that contrary to what some extreme crypto natives believe, regulators are not evil. They're not killjoys. They're not looking to destroy this technology simply for the sake of destroying the technology. They're seeking to understand. They're seeking to understand so that they can figure out what they need to do in order to regulate it properly. And in this region, we've seen a lot of great strides made by the regional regulators, right? I would have to particularly commend Abu Dhabi Global Markets, VARA, the Central Bank of Bahrain, for example. They really are taking the lead in terms of really understanding the technology and creating frameworks that would be replicable elsewhere, right? At the same time, on the crypto native side of the world, I think there is a lack of understanding of why regulators do things the way they do. Sometimes the things that you see that frustrate you are due to genuine inefficiencies, right? But quite a lot of the time, those things are in place for a reason. The reason why you don't know what that reason is because it's done a very good job of preventing a disaster from happening for the last 50 years, right? Things like appropriate levels of financial risk management, things like the judicious use of intermediaries, right? Intermediaries is not always a bad thing, for example, right? You can't take every single transaction in the world and remove intermediaries from it. In some transactions you can, in some transactions you cannot. When it comes to settlement of transactions, you can't take every single transaction in the world and make it instant direct settlement. That is irreversible, right? Good for some types of transactions, not good for others, right? So it's a matter of both sides understanding each other much, much better. What I always say to the regulators and to the traditional financial world is that make an effort, start getting your crypto perspectives from places other than traditional media. Listen to some podcasts, watch some YouTube videos, because all you're getting from traditional media today is a very, very biased, one-sided perspective. And similarly, I always say to the crypto native people, stop completely shirking traditional media, because that lets you know what the other side is thinking, right? Once we both understand each other's perspectives, I think we're going to make a lot more progress a lot more quickly.
That's actually a very good point, because I actually agree, because like if you look into innovation, it's all about, it's not about regulation, it's here to stop innovation. It's really for regulators, for regulation to understand, to adapt as we evolve our innovation. Take an example, like even before blockchain, a very simple feature around like face recognition. It is something that's quite intriguing, quite controversial, but yet most of the regulators nowadays allowed it for the reason because they start understanding the technology behind it. What we have to understand is regulators at the moment are trying to understand the technology underneath all of this, regardless whether it's a blockchain or AI, and how does it apply to the current regulation. Now, a lot of the regulators, like I really commend here, like for locally here in the UAE, for example, we have VARA, we have ADGM, we have the FSA, all of this, are looking to like legitimizing, because they're now more knowledge, the technology will be there. It's really how we adjust the current regulation to adapt to effectively what the technology empowers. So take it for example, like a notion of settlement finality. Can it now be recognized by the blink of a blockchain? This is something that's quite missing in a lot of our legislation out there. So is it still relevant to have the current legislation in place to be able to support this? Things around as well, like the tokenization of asset. Something that we know that nowadays we live in a digital world. We consciously recognize a digital representation of asset as something that's quite well known, quite already trustable, but regulations still need to catch up and adapt to this certainty.
Yeah, and regulations are going to be what allows the next major onboarding of people into crypto. So it's something, whether you like it or not, it's not going anywhere. So we need to get used to it. In terms of Web3 and cryptocurrency for good, I was doing some research on you guys yesterday, and I saw you're involved in some Web3 uses for good causes. I wondered if you could touch on that, Willy.
Yeah, this is actually one of the underrated use cases when we talk about blockchain. We all talk about like speculation, cryptocurrency, making money, but there's some good element about blockchain. Take an example, like our work with the Hope for Justice. Hope for Justice is something like it's a cross-agency organizational, non-profit organization who allows a lot of our, I think like anti-trafficking regulators to work into like a more secured ledger, and more, I would say, like immutable ledger that allows, that overlay with privacy allows like not only to stop suppliers, small, medium enterprises from employing like human trafficking victims, but also allow them to educate and sort of like guide them in such a way that to correct this action. There are other cases as well, for example, like our work with a lot of the central banks. We have talked about Web3 with carbon trading for green financing. We do have the marketplace to have demand out there for like, for example, green bond, green projects, but the reality is there's not really like a connected marketplace that allows them to invest in this kind of products and a lot of these projects. And this is where we work in R3 is to allow all of them to work together in a more like secured, in much more like a more certainty way.
And we touched on earlier as well, with energy, Web3 and cryptocurrency, specifically mining, can take up slack in the energy system, fund renewable energy. There's so many good uses for Web3 that we're seeing more and more, and I think they'll just continue to come. For a final question, it's quite a long one, so I think we can start on that now. The growth of crypto and Web3 over the next 5 years, where is it going? You can talk specific to your company, you can talk specific to crypto as a whole. It's completely up to you where you go with the question. But where is it going and what's the end goal?
5 years is a lifetime. I can't...
you could choose any timeline then.
I can't even imagine. I mean, I think what gets me out of bed every morning and super passionate about the work that we're doing, especially as we look at what the projects that are being built out for Web3. I've got 2 daughters, they're 14 and 12, and so I'm starting to kind of roughly picture a world where they'll enter the workforce and truly be in control of their digital footprint in a way that's meaningful, that will drive a new level of innovation. I think a new level of community as well, that is much more tangible than anything we've ever seen before. And I think it's already in the zeitgeist of the next generation. They are really, really looking to build something that creates a better global community and a better planet. And I think Web3 is going to give them the tools that in a really meaningful way allow them to become young adults that are naturally interacting as good global citizens. At least that's what I hope.
Nice. So you're basically asking when moon, right?
No, first it was what moon.
What moon?
What moon? Yeah.
I mean, again, right, history. 20 years ago, if you had a website, you were innovative. These days, a website is a hygiene factor for any self-respecting business. Right? And then 10 years ago, cloud was a big innovation. These days, a cloud strategy is non-negotiable for any company worth its salt. I mean, same way, especially with companies that have a lot of consumer interfacing, the banks, the fintechs, etc. Web3 is going to be a critical part of the strategy. It's not going to be, do you have a Web3 strategy, but it's going to be, what is your Web3 strategy? And it's going to be ingrained into your marketing and finance and overall strategy, and it's going to be across payments, airlines, tourism. I mean, there's so many great ideas in which you can use Web3 and sort of use that as a lever for sort of enhancing the overall experience and create value for both the business and the end consumer. So net-net, I think it's a secular uptick, apart from the usual micro turbulences at any point in time.
So, I mean, I would never go into speculating on what is going to happen or by when it is going to happen, but I will speak a little bit about what I would like to see happen, what I think needs to happen to sustainably, get growth in the Web3 space. I think one of the first things we need is the development of a global set of standards. This is going to be very, very necessary, especially when we talk about different types of interoperability. So if you look at the traditional finance world today, when you do a simple card purchase, right there, it has touched at least 2 different banking systems. It has potentially gone across both the Mastercard and the Visa networks. If you're using something domestically, it has touched that network as well. And it's happened for you in a single second, right? These are all different systems built on completely different technologies, but they're sharing a common set of standards for messaging, for representing data. That's why all of these systems work together as seamlessly as they do. Now we have a lot of different blockchains coming up, both layer 1, layer 2, layer 3 apps on the way as well. If they're really going to interoperate, then there needs to be a consistent set of standards. that all of them share so that they can do their technology upgrades and their technology innovations, but the consistent set of standards allows them all to interoperate. So this is number one, right? Number two, I think there need to be a lot more partnerships between the traditional financial world and the crypto native world. Both the worlds have a lot to teach each other, right? The crypto native world is coming up with a lot of fantastic innovations, new ways of doing finance, right? Decentralized finance is one of these areas which I personally am very, very excited about. The traditional finance world knows how to manage the risks associated with these things, how to govern these things, right? A lot of the knowledge they have is very, very useful. And when you bring these two things together, that's when you're going to have really solid decentralized finance style offerings that people are going to be able to benefit from. And finally, as I told my panelists, we were discussing just before this, I would love to see NFTs go from beyond being pictures to being my passport. Like, when is that going to happen? Any government people here? I'd love to see that happen as well. Using these things so that we can use them in everyday life, right? So those are the things I would like to see happen. I hope they will happen in the next 5 years. What I think we will be looking at is much, much more a Web 2.5 rather than a Web 3.
And Willy, finish us off.
Mine's very simple. Again, this is my wish, my hope since probably 10 years ago. I hope what we have here is it will facilitate more an impactful and inclusive economy. We have a chance here. We have now a true technology that promotes trust. We don't have the problem with the legacy around, like a lot of those opaque systems, intermediaries, all of those. So I'm hoping that this will launch a more inclusive, a more integrated digital economy that's open for all.
Awesome, and that is the end of our panel. Thanks everyone for coming. I know it's just after lunch, so it's good to see everyone here. And thank you, Jamie, Ram. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Willy. Thank you, Kamran. And let's have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Max.